Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ted Gardner, and I'm an interviewer for the Library of Congress Oral History Project, which is so capably handled here in our wonderful public library history department by our historian Dennis Daly and videographer. And we're speaking this morning to Roger Johnson of Cincinnati, who served in the Navy in World War II. Roger, where were you born?
I was born on Lincoln Avenue in Cincinnati, and six years old, we moved to Indian Hill. My grandfather had an estate out there, what do you want to call it? So I was basically raised on Indian Hill.
Okay.
Went to Terrace Park High School when there was a high school there.
Oh, you did? Now that's interesting right there, because so many people don't know that Terrace Park had a high school.
Right, and we have a reunion every year about that. And
became part of the Marymount School District. Right,
and I stayed there, basically that was my home base until 1980, actually, and then I moved where I am now, which is over near Moeller High School.
Tell us about your family growing up as a boy.
Well, very conservative, very non-alcoholic, but my mother and dad were both educated. My dad from Overland, my mother from U.S.S, and so a very conservative background. We hated Roosevelt, all that kind of stuff. And non-alcoholic, like I said. So one of the big things about me that probably would be strike a note with people that see this is I'm very naive. When I went on the ship, I didn't know what queers were. I mean, I knew the word, but I didn't know anything about that. How to get along with people from different backgrounds. Like from Scully Square in Boston, for instance, they had this accent, And so the main thing that I guess you would bring to mind in me is that I was just an innocent 18-year-old, like so many were.
Well, no, so many of us were like that, of course. And I came from a small town background, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one sister.
One sister?
Yes.
And
she was older.
Did you go to Terrace Park Elementary and then to Terrace Park?
All the way through.
Oh, my.
Didn't have a kindergarten at that time.
No.
First grade on through. And
I'll be darned.
all my buddies from there are just about gone.
Yeah,
I think there's one left. I know. Maybe not even that now. That was in my class.
What year were you born?
1925.
1925.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're familiar, of course, with the old age of depression and all that era and so forth and so on, and growing up, and what it was like, and how we survived that with our families. It was so important.
We sold chickens. My dad was an artist. He worked for Methodist Book Concern as one of the illustrators.
Sure.
And when the Depression, when the big thing hit in '29, he lost his job, and we moved out. That was another reason we moved out to Indian Hill. Mm-hmm. And he had all kinds of things to try to make a little money, because my aunt, who actually owned the place, just had a little pension. And so at one time we sold chickens. So we would do the chickens, and I would pluck them, and they would take them around to these estates of these millionaires, and they'd contact them somehow or other, and they would take them up to the door and give them to the cook. So that was part of our keeping going in the Depression.
What a great thing, though, for a youngster to learn. And
I had to work. I had to work hard. Although it was an idyllic setting. I couldn't see any houses where we were. There was trees on all sides. And, I could play where I wanted, trees to climb, woods to explore, had a creek to get pollywogs and all that kind of stuff, dam up, make a little pond. So I had an idyllic, but I worked hard, and my dad made sure I did and helped in the kitchen and doing things like that. We would can apples and peaches and all that kind of stuff too, because we
lived off the land.
We lived off the land. They had a great flower garden up there, and it was just idyllic. And
now in school, you're a big fellow. Did you play sports or anything?
I played all the sports they would let me play.
Yeah.
Track, football, baseball. Basketball, yeah.
Sure.
I was one of the stars on their basketball.
You and I played in the days when they had a center jump in basketball.
Oh, yeah.
For everything.
Yeah.
After the basket, after the free throw, you went
to the center jump.
Remember that?
Yeah, we in Marymount High School, were the two, in my senior year in '43, we were the finalists, and we won the championship that year in '43, and we beat Marymount to do that.
Now, going through high school, what other interests did you have? Writing, photography?
I designed the bulldog. We were bulldogs, and I designed the bulldog that they used on the school paper. I was interested in Spanish. I loved, took Spanish classes. I loved geography. I just a nut on geography. And we had a great geography teacher. So, you know, I was a pretty well-rounded student. I wasn't a mathematic type student, but I loved the arts of all kinds. And my buddies were, one of my buddies was Eparixi Jr., the third, who was the son of the big pitcher that was on the Reds team. He had a big mansion there in Elm Street and Miami Avenue, and he was my buddy, and I would stay overnight in his house many a night.
Well, we know Epa the Third has an insurance business out there on Gibbon Road.
Right, right. I'm not sure it's the third. He's dead.
No, wait a minute.
This would be about the fourth or fifth.
This would be fourth. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, big, tall.
Yeah, he went to Davidson eventually.
That's right, from Country Day School.
My buddy went to the private school up north here. Can't think of the name of it now, but it's a well-known school. And anyway, I just had an all-around time in high school.
Right, and then you must have known a number of the early people out there in Indian Hill.
Well, we knew a little bit about them, but we were somewhat isolated, and we weren't in the crowd of, you know, with the millionaires or anything like that. We were just ordinary people, and I went to Terrace Park, and most of those people sent their kids to private schools, and they could afford it. We couldn't. I used to walk down the hill through what they called the Fresh Air Farm at that time. Now it's Pebbles. What is it? Stepping Stones. Stepping Stones. Yeah.
Right, right.
And I'd walk. I could walk to school about 2 miles, and go up Elm Street and that way. So I did it all.
Well, it was a wonderful time. Now, as you approached your high school graduation in '43, were you looking ahead to be drafted, or?
Oh yeah, by that time,
or what?
yes. Yep. Eparixi and I were the two tallest guys in the class. He was 6'8", I was 6'4", and so we led the parade down to be, you know, to get our diplomas.
Sure.
And I'll never forget that day. And let's see, you were asking about what now? I forgot.
Oh well, about looking ahead.
Oh yeah, I knew I was going to be drafted. So that's a little story in itself there for me, because
Good, tell us that.
When I finally, the day of going in, you know, joining, bye-bye everybody, I went in, and I remember that just as clear as a bell, 2 big doors, and one said Navy and one said Marines. And I said Navy. And just as I was about ready to go through that door, I must have fainted, because I woke up and I was looking at people that were looking down at me.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And I think what happened was, and it's come back to me a little bit once in a while later on, and my daughter has it, if we get in a stuffy place where there's a lot of people and the oxygen gets a little scarce, you tend to faint a little bit, I think. And so when I went through the phys ed part of it, where they were examining me later on, one of these doctors looked at me and he said, "We can't let this guy through. He fainted out there. He's bad. He's no good." And the doctor next to him said, "Are you kidding? Look at him. There's no way we're going to keep him out of the Navy." So that was sort of interesting there. That,
you were a good physical specimen.
I was big and strong, and I just happened to faint. So
how about that? Now, when you signed up, did they send you right off to Boots, or what? What was
yeah, sent me right off, and eventually I ended up. I guess my eyesight was good, and it was terrific apparently, because my scholarship was certain level, and they sent me to rangefinder school in San Diego. And that's how I happened to end up operating that big 12-foot telescope, and you know, that was my career. I was 24 times closer to anything than anybody on our ship, 24-power telescope. I was the one who identified planes because in the San Diego school we were schooled in identifying every plane in both the Allies and the Axis. So I had to know every plane, and I had to identify them at 250th of a second. So they'd flash on the screen, and I had to tell what plane it was. German, Italian, French, whatever. So I had a very important duty on the ship.
Absolutely.
Which, like I alluded to before, I was second in succession there because this guy who lives up the street from me now was, I don't know why, but he was designated as the man to be on the telescope at battle stations. Now, you had watches, so different watches, I was on there also.
Sure.
But, and this gets a little sticky here, but apparently he wasn't doing a good enough job when we were practicing off of Oahu and Hawaii, and our gunnery officer said, "Get Johnson on there." So they put me on there.
Good.
And apparently we did better because from then on I was the rangefinder operator.
Now, when you, where did you go aboard the first ship?
Oh, Brooklyn Navy Yard. My mother accompanied me, and I
They
went.
sent you back across the country.
Well, they
San Diego.
thought I was pretty able to handle things, I guess. They gave me 20 men, and they said, "You take these men on the railroad and drop them off in Chicago, and then you go on to Brooklyn." So I met the Melvin in Brooklyn Navy Yard, and one of my big memories is steel. That's all I could see. When you go in a Navy Yard, people who've never been there are just knocked over by that. And when I went in Brooklyn Navy Yard, and of course I met my ship there, and we had a shakedown cruise eventually in Bermuda, like most destroyers did. We'd go out every morning, and this was January, and we'd come back with a coating of ice on every part of our ship, topside about that thick, just white. And we picked it up out in the Long Island Sound, so that was sort of an interesting fact there.
Well, I should say, so you were there right through the winter.
Well, we went to Bermuda sometime in February, I think, and couldn't find it. Our officers lost Bermuda. We love to bring up enlisted men because the officers, all the time are above us.
They were in charge, absolutely. They couldn't find it.
That's even, we had a history made up, and that is even, the officers allowed that to come in there, that they could not find Bermuda. They eventually found it. But
right out there in the Gulf Stream. That is
and
funny.
we went through the canal, of course, and that's another story.
Oh, yeah, tell us
because
about that.
I was a swimmer. I loved water. Anytime I see a body of water, I get in it. And that lake in the middle, Gatun Lake in the middle of the
Canal.
there, and we stopped and anchored there, and our captain said, "I want the guys to get a swim." So he anchored there, and he put 4 guys in 2 boats with 30-06 rifles because there were sharks in there. And sharks were not that bad, I guess, but so while we swam and dove off the ship, while these Captain's gig and the other ship, other little boat we had, went around and around with these guys with 30-06 rifles. So that, and I bumped into one of those jellyfish there, and it stung me, but didn't hurt me that bad. So I got the experience of, the people hear about them all the time.
Sure.
In fact, we actually somebody got a hold of one, and they got it up on our ship. And I have a picture in here of all the guys looking at that and wondering, isn't that funny? Because when you get it up on the ship, it flattens out and there's nothing there.
Nothing there.
It just flattens out. It looks like water.
Yeah. Really.
So that was an interesting
Well,
thing.
you had a real tropical experience there. What did it take you to get through the canal? A couple of days, or?
I think it was 2 days, and then we stopped, and one of my poems is about, this is something I wasn't sure how you people would feel about this, but the experience of finding out what a house of ill repute is. I walked down the Panama City there, and I walked down the streets, and I would see once in a while a line of men lining up, and I didn't know what it was. And my poem was about learning that these places were there for the men, and they would line up and go through.
This is real life.
This is real life. And they'd come back at night, and they had all these prophylactic things that they gave the soldiers because of worry about disease. And our head, which is the John, the
Right.
toilets, and the urinals were just piled up every night with prophylactic clutter. So I wasn't doing it. I mean, not that I had nothing against anybody that did it.
I understand.
It was fine with me, but I just wasn't into it, and
wasn't
so
your thing, of
I
course.
was an observer and a very interested observer of that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, you know that you've pointed that out so clearly, Roger, that part of your maturing and learning experience and having your eyes open pretty darn wide to what goes on in the world outside of Indian Hill.
Well, yes,
Cincinnati,
that's right.
Ohio.
From Indian Hill to Panama City, and to see
whole
the
world.
sailors lined up like that was, I really didn't know what it was.
Whole world
And I
of
had a buddy
difference.
with me who told me about it.
Sure, sure.
And you know, another interesting thing to this maybe is in our reunions, we have a destroyer reunion every couple of years. I would mention that once in a while to guys at our table or something, and nobody admitted that they went except one guy. And he was a mechanic, and he said, "Oh yeah, I went there." And I thought, well, I found one guy who is willing to admit that he went in one of those houses of ill repute. And I thought that was sort of, well, I sort of admired him
Sure.
for that, because you know,
Candor and, you know.
he was just an ordinary 18-year-old like I was at the time, probably, and he didn't know what was
Absolutely.
going on.
Now, did you go on across to Pearl?
Yeah, we
From the canal?
we lost a pilot. One of our duties was, I remember this because I have it in my summary in that other one. But we were escorting aircraft carriers and going to Hawaii. We would pick up pilots, and they were having all this training, of course, on the way to Hawaii with these pilots learning to land on their carriers. And one of them, a lot of them, didn't make it. They would crash and so forth, or crash in the water.
Right.
And we would run out. Our destroyer was, do 40 knots. We'd run out and pick them up. And we lost one, and that was sort of a bad time because one of the pilots didn't make it. And
Right.
it also was another naivety was cleared out there a little bit because I realized this is serious business.
Serious business.
Men are dying.
Yep.
And that was another sort of
I know.
introduction
That's
to
another
me
step in your.
to what the war was all about.
Yeah. Yes, I understand that perfectly.
And then I got on the telescope in Hawaii there, and we went on out and had battle after battle out in the.
Well, now we're talking what, early 1944 when you were out there.
Right. And
Went
we were at
went
Saipan. We did bombardments at Saipan.
Okay, that was June.
All kinds of patrols. We were at
June of 44.
a horrible battle there at that little Palau.
Oh, yeah,
was
the
a horrible
Palaus.
thing.
Yeah, it was
And that was the first time. That was another brainer to me to make me grow up quick. It was the first time I saw a dead body, and we were patrolling around Palau, and that was a horrible hurting of our men because they landed and there wasn't any beach. It was just rocks, as you probably know. And so we round and round we'd go, and one day we came by and there was all these bodies floating. Well, I thought it were Japanese, I just automatically Japanese. And we got closer and I realized all these bodies
They were American.
were Americans. And that woke me up just a little more as to what I was seeing and what I was into. And even though I enjoyed it, like I said earlier, I think I said that earlier, but I had a real great time in a way in the Navy. But
Well, that particular campaign in the Palaus was a terrible campaign. We lost 6,000 men. in
oh,
that
it was
campaign.
awful.
Mostly Marines, of course, but it was a terrible.
We had somebody in that class, in Marmer's class, that
Yeah.
was on the invasion of that, and he explained how stupid the whole thing was.
Oh, it
It's
was, and it was unnecessary.
an unnecessary island to take. They didn't
Could
need
have
to take.
bypassed that so
Yeah,
easily, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that was one of those terrible decisions of wartime that we had to live with. Now, as you worked your way across the Pacific, as you say, you went through the Palaus, and then, of course, the Marianas.
Marianas, right? We bombarded there a lot.
And
we sank a
supported
sub.
the
I think we
landings.
sank a sub off of there. And of course we, just one thing I remember about that is that Tinian, which was south of Saipan, the next island down, was the B-29 launching point.
Yeah.
That's where they stationed them in that early part of the war. And Eprixi was a maintenance man on those turrets in the B-29s. Really? And I heard about that through the grapevine, and I always looked over at Tinian and I'd see the B-29s take off, overhead, and I thought, old Ep's over there, but I can't get to him, So the other buddy I saw that was in the Navy was on the Mississippi, George Evelyn, who his dad had a lumber yard in Terrace Park, and he was on the Mississippi. So we passed the Mississippi one time up near the Solomon Islands. And as we passed, I waved to him, tried to get, this is Roger, but I'm sure he didn't see me. It was one of those reactions, that.
Did you ever get to meet after the war?
Oh, Ep, I did, yeah. I met all those,
And
those
George
guys.
and-
Yeah, right. I wasn't a real good friend after the war. Our lives went in different directions. They went to one school, I went to another one.
Well, so many things were changed by that war.
Oh,
My
yeah.
goodness, our ways of life and so forth.
Yeah.
And now, let's get into this action situation. Where did you serve on the Melvin, where you had the most action? Enemy action.
Well, the enemy action, I would say, even though Surigao Straits, we sunk a battleship, I would say, from my own viewpoint, the action we had the most was Iwo Jima, because that's where we got our reputation. We had given a name by the Saratoga of Black Devil, and many years later, when I was shopping for models of a ship, plastic models I could put together, I came in a little hobby shop, and I saw U.S.S. Melvin, DD-680. That's my ship. There was 600 and some destroyers, and they made a model of our ship, but it said Blue Devil. And I always thought, I bet it was the racial thing at that time, and Black Devil would have sounded bad. And so what they named us, the Saratoga saw us cruising around. We shot down about 4 or 5 planes that were diving at her. One finally got her, but we shot down 4 or 5 of them there. And we had a dark paint job at that time, so from a distance it looked black. And they saw us cruising around, boom, boom, all these flames going out, shooting down planes, and they thought we looked like a devil, so they gave us the name Black Devil. And so that to me is probably because the kamikazes by that time were really working. Early on at Surigao, I have something here that I may get to it not, but they were just starting at Surigao Straits, and by the time we got to Iwo Jima, they were sending everything and just putting guys in the pilot seat and said, go, And so that, to me, was the most action because Iwo Jima was, a horrible battle on land, but it also had a lot of Navy cruising around, and it was dark and storms. It was just stormy, dark, all big waves, just really scary.
Well, and also the whole aspect of Iwo Jima was so grim and so terrible because it was such a surprise to us. Didn't realize the volcanic ash for the Marines getting bogged down, all that type of thing. Now, did you pick up rescue men in the water off Iwo Jima too?
Probably, although I don't remember that. The ones I remember best are tales, because when we went later on to bombard Japan, we had big battleships, carriers, all.
Sure.
We had 3 times we went up and bombarded Japan, and we were escorting them. And a man fell off of the, gosh, I can't remember which carrier it was now, but he fell off, stepped somehow wrong over the back end and fell into the water. And they designated 2 destroyers to hopefully find this guy. And so we were designated to look for him, and they gave us the best they could as his position when he fell off. So we spent an hour with our searchlights, and this tells you about America. We were allowed to turn on searchlights, which was a no-no. You weren't even allowed to smoke a cigarette.
I know it.
All the doors were rigged.
Darkened ship.
The door opened, the light went out.
Yep.
For an hour, we searched with searchlights out for this man out there.
Right.
And finally, the captain said, well, the other guy that was with us, the other destroyer, went on, and they said, well, we'll take one more turn around. And somebody heard a whistle. They heard a whistle, and finally they located it and finally picked the guy up.
Oh,
of course, he had been issued that whistle that very day.
Isn't that
And
something?
so the big story about this is, which you may not believe, that guy was blown off a carrier later on in the war, and guess who picked him up? The Melvin. So he came onto our ship and he said, boy, you guys, you were saving my life. So that was a tale.
Story.
It's hard to believe that would actually happen, but it did.
That is a wonderful story.
That's a big story for us because, number one, because America lets you, the United States, lets you do that kind of thing. Life is so precious.
We took chances to save our men, to do our very best. I know that was so important out there. Well, life aboard a destroyer. What was it like to be on a tin can?
One of the things you remember, of course, is the watches every 4 hours, and they changed all the time, and so you'd either have the 12 to 4 or the 8 to 12 or whatever, and so you adjusted yourself. But destroyer life was exciting, very much so, because it was so fast, and we did all these interesting things, protecting and submarine hunting and all that. But it was dangerous because all they had was this little cable, 2 cables around the ship, and in a storm, you actually had to really be careful. And one storm, I had to go from my bunk, which was in the back end of the ship, up to my, we would steer the ship once in a while. We had that duty once in a while. Our particular ranking would, once in a while we had the helm. And so to get from my bunk to the helm, I had to go over the top and climb over all these things to get over there because it was too dangerous to go down below. So that's something about destroyers that people don't know. Maybe weren't conscious of how dangerous it was in storms. And we were in 2 typhoons, and one of them I was at the helm, and the thing that gives you the 180, 260, whatever binnacle. To keep that on the course, I had to have a dividing line between when we went one way, which would be 260, and the other way, which would be 120. I had to divide that in my mind so that we stayed on a straight course, because the only way I could do that, since I went way over here and way over there, and I couldn't trust that because that was way off, and I just divided that in half. And so we had 2 typhoons, and when you do that with a destroyer, the waves come clear over and even hit the bridge. So that's part of it you're going to see about a destroyer, which is dangerous. Our lunch and meal thing, when we were on battle stations, all the cooks brought you chili. It was usually chili. But on the regular day when you'd eat, one of the things that I will never forget is that you went down and then you went through and you'd go by this big can where people dump their trash. And then you'd go in and get your food and come back out, and you went by that same thing on the way out to dump your trash. Well, until you got used to it, it was hard because half of the crew was sick half the time. And you'd go by that, and here was somebody puking their guts out, right in front of you, and you're going in there to eat, So you had to get used to that. So that was one of the things about a destroyer that was a little interesting. Our 5-inch guns were very interesting to me because we control them. Our director controlled that, and I never were scared by them at all because sometimes we'd fire all 5 at once and the ship would go like that. It would actually move a little bit.
The recoil.
But I was never right beside one except one day, And I heard the boing, boing, boing go, and I came out of my back, and my entrance was right near a 5-inch gun, the last one on the ship. And just as I came out, and I thought my ears were gone. So that's another little thing that you discover, how loud those guns are. Even a 5-inch, 16-inch, I just don't know what that would sound like, but 5-inch was loud enough. So that was, destroyer life was just St. Louis blues. They must have played that 2,000 times. I loved it, but it got a little old. But they had the loudspeaker going, at least not when you weren't in enemy territory, and so that was sort of pleasant because these sunny days, you'd be walking around and doing your duty, and the loudspeaker would be playing nice things from our
Glenn Miller's music and so
Glenn Miller's music, right? And it was just so for me. I told you about getting up on the radar, at night and the moonlit nights and so forth. It was really pleasant for me because mainly our crew was either efficient enough, we never got hurt, or I was just lucky, one or the other, I guess, because destroyers were sunk, destroyers were hit by surface ships and, of course, planes. In Okinawa, that was the epitome of the kamikazes up there, because they were just knocking off destroyers right and left. Because they couldn't make it to the carriers, which was their number one goal. So they would see a destroyer and they say, well, secondary, we'll just hit the destroyer. So that was a very bad time for destroyers. And
what class of destroyer was the Melvin?
It was a Fletcher class.
Fletcher class.
2,100 tons.
Boy, what a ship. What a ship.
And they were fast.
Great ship.
Just really fun because I love the speed. We'd say there's a sailor out there, we'll pick him up and boom, and just take off. And everything flying and maneuverability. It was just fun. And of course, in our torpedo run in Surigao Straits there, like I said, we were roused out at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:25. It was the exact time. And they said, we're going to make a torpedo run on battleships. And here it was dark, And so that was one time I was really glad that we had that speed, because on a torpedo run, you're trying to be as accurate as you can, but you're still worried about, a battleship shooting at you. And it was dark, and they didn't have radar, thank goodness.
No.
So that saved our butts probably, but excuse my language. But we also went out first and came back so that our smoke screen protected us, and the battleship could not see us. However, they fired their guns at us. They had 14-inch guns, I think, and they put star shells up above, all around us, and it was just like daylight. And of course, that scared you because they can see us. But there was our smoke screen, and that saved our lives. And then they fired shells, and one of my pictures is about the shells hitting all around us, and they made a horrible ba-doom. That was scary.
Hit the water.
And luckily they never centered on us because they really couldn't see us. Some went past, some went short, and none of them ever hit us. So that was
Do you remember the name of the battleship, the enemy ship?
Fuso. There's a picture of it here. Fuso.
Oh, yeah, F-U-S-O. Sure.
One of those crazy. Crazy upper parts there that looks like.
What they call the pagoda. The pagoda mast.
You wonder who designed that thing. It looked like he was drunk or something from our viewpoint.
Typical of the Japanese design.
Fuso, we hit it, and all the destroyers that fired their torpedoes at that thing, there was destroyers on the other side, on the western side, and our group was on the eastern side, fired our torpedoes, little torpedo boats fired torpedoes at them, and what happened, I don't know, but nobody hit it. All of them went by and missed that battleship but us. One torpedo. That's the only one that ever hit that, and you wonder what. There was bad torpedoes. They found out later there was bad torpedoes that just never got there or whatever.
Particularly earlier in the war.
Right. So
bad.
Anyway, it was just
now, did your ship get awards? Did you get a presidential citation?
We got citations. Our captain got citation from that particular battle for heroics, and Silver
Cross
Star,
or
Navy
so.
Star or something, I forget it, it's on the thing there.
Yeah.
But, we were, Iwo Jima, we got one for that, and we got, strangely, one when we were going home, we thought, up in the Kurils, the Kuril Islands north of Japan. We were sent home. Admiral Halsey called up on our TBS and said, Melvin, you've done a good job. It's time for you to go home and get repairs. And so we salute you, and we hope, give you a good send-off and hope you make it home. So they sent us up the Kurils to bombard Parameseru, which was a town up in there. And we also were supposed to sink anything that was floating. And that brings up another tale for me, because it was, we had a man who was an officer. I never liked him, Franklin, and you can't help that, you know, but there you are.
That's right.
But we came up on fishing boats one time, and there was about 30 or 40 fishing boats in a sort of a little fleet there. And of course, we were supposed to sink them. So we thought, well, they're gonna, you know, shoot shells at them. Well, and sink them by hitting the waterline or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He ordered the kind of shell which explodes above,
Oh, yes.
which kills everybody.
Yeah.
And so we could see it happening, and all these ships were being hit by the kind of shells which explode above and just kill everything underneath them. And we thought that was sort of a little bit too far out, but that was what he ordered. And so we went on, of course, on up to Adak, Alaska from there on, and bingo, Adak, Alaska. I played basketball up there. They had big gyms there. But at the time we were there, they dropped the atomic bomb, and they said, whoa, Melvin, stop. You aren't going home. They sent us back to Japan, of course.
Oh, they did.
And we exploded 365 mines in the harbors of Japan, following minesweepers. And so that was basically the end of our action part of our career after.
Well, and minesweeping, that was a very dangerous
Oh
thing,
yeah,
too.
it was.
My goodness.
We had two guys on our forecastle that had 30-06s, and the minesweepers would cut the cables. The mine would come
Float
up, and then they would use these big rifles to explode them.
Right.
But once in a while, they would just bang, bang, and they'd hit a mine 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times, and it didn't explode. But it would be still coming by us, and once in a while, up above, I could look down, you know, from that high point I had up there, and I would watch this mine come along beside us,
Oh, my gosh.
and it would bump.
Whoa.
And you'd hear it scrape, you know, I think, whoa. I hope it wasn't, and so that duty, you're right, was dangerous. And,
Very dangerous.
because I don't know whether we lost any minesweepers that bumped into mines, but probably not. They were very careful about everything like that. We got ashore twice in
Oh, you did?
Japan,
You got ashore
yeah.
in Japan?
Yeah. One of my tales there is there was a freighter that was sunk, I suppose, or exploded and ran on the sand to keep from sinking. So his big prow was up on the sand when we were walking along the beach there in Japan. And so we could get up on it. They had ladders up somehow, and and I got up to the bridge, and I found out later why. But here was this huge telescope, about this big around,
Wow.
up on the bridge, and set in this stand still. And they'd said that if we found anything like that, we could bring it home. We could take it on board ship and bring it home with us. So I lifted this thing, took it off, got it down to the beach, and it must have weighed 100 pounds. And I got about halfway on the beach, and I said, "To hell with it. It's too heavy. I just couldn't carry it anymore." So that was a dumb thing I did, but it was interesting because the Japanese were they wanted chocolate, they wanted cigarettes, so you could trade with that, you know.
Now, the bombs were dropped on the 6th and the 9th of August of 45.
Yeah, I didn't remember the exact time.
Do you,
Yeah,
do
okay.
you remember, where were you when you heard
Well,
the
I
news?
remember we had a little, probably weekly newspaper that we put out some, I don't know what they did, they had a little printing press or some, and would, you know, they couldn't say much because in those days you didn't want, but since it was for our eyes only, they would give some things that were happening, where invasions were happening and so forth. But what I remember about that day is that they passed out all these little newspapers that say the atomic bomb has dropped, and they explained what atomic bomb. So I don't remember exactly, you know, my position or whatever it was, but I remember reading that little, and of course all the men gathered around and would say, "Oh my goodness, what's an atomic bomb?" You know, so nobody knew what it was. It solved everything pretty much. We thought, and we went through having to do the second one, of course, which you didn't want to do, but. So for us, it was bad news that we couldn't go to Seattle. We had to turn around and go back.
You got that. You got the ADAC, and then you had to go back.
Yep. Yeah. Good, ADAC was fun. I mean, it's bare. You know, it's just bad weather up there. There's no trees. You know, it's all terrible tundra and little streams that you could see the fish going up and down. You know, they were right in the surface there. And I enjoyed it in a certain extent because I played basketball up there. They had a team, and I was able to get on the team, and we had a league up there. We played basketball and sort of enjoyed that. You know, it was fun. But and one of the things you remember about bases like that is the number of men that sometimes you aren't conscious of the number of men. Being on a small ship, only 320 men, you sometimes aren't conscious of the vast millions of men who were in the service at that time. You know, you just didn't see them. And when I was there on ADAC, one day I walked into this big old, what do you call them? I can't think of the word. You know, these
Quonset hut?
Quonset hut, yeah. And it was big. And I thought, what's that for? And I walked in there, and it was sort of high where you went in, and you went down below to get to the main floor. And I looked in here, and there must have been 200 ping pong tables.
Oh my God.
I mean, the whole floor was ping pong tables. And here it was about half full, I guess, of guys playing. But, you know, something hadn't struck me before that much, even though in boot camp you see a lot of guys. But I just realized, man, 200 ping pong tables. And, you know, they just had that many men at that base at different times. At night, and the Sir Gus rates.
Right.
And this shows the shells hitting around us. And of course, I was up high, and I looked down at the light coming from their shells, just lighting up like daylight, you know. And that's what my poem was about. This one is the House of Ill Repute in Panama. The guys lined up there in their little house, you know, and people walking by. It was tropical, hot.
Steamy.
I'm not sure I'll get to this. This is an incident where a plane dove at us when they were just starting to kamikaze. And we were supposed to fire at it, and the guns did not fire. And we found out that it was the fault of the man who was supposed to pull the trigger. And so this plane went over the top of us and didn't hit us. Went on past us, and F-6Fs, boom, shot him down. So the story is that why didn't he die? Why didn't he, hit us?
Why didn't he hit you? Yeah.
Don't know why. This is an incident in Noumea, New Caledonia. And, a man who became an admiral later on. At that time, he was a signalman. And to get on our ship and off of it, and when you anchor out in the harbor, you have to do this rope thing.
Sure.
They don't have steps or anything that you can go up. You have to climb up and down this rope. And that night it was rough, and the waves would bang you against the ship, and then they'd come away, bang you against the ship. And this man was drunk, and he jumped to the rope when the wave was taking you away. So he fell in between our little boat and the ship. And then, of course, bang, it went into him. We thought he was crushed.
Yeah.
And my poem was about the fact that we just, and we just watched, and finally, here comes a sound out beyond our ship, and a little white hat comes up. And here he was out there. He'd gone underneath somehow or other, and he came up, and he was all right.
Oh, my goodness.
But of course, the problem with people who don't drink in those days is that we have to get those guys up that rope.
Sure.
They're drunk. And so
terrible.
That next part was probably worse than anything, trying to get this drunk out.
Out of control, I know it.
It was just,
my goodness, couldn't help himself.
Oh, this is our ship. Another,
Beautiful ship. That Fletcher class was just a absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous design. And
this is just a.
now
this is-
you aboard a
this is-
ship like the Melvin, you're talking about your 5-inch batteries and so forth, but you had anti-aircraft too.
Yes, we did.
20 millimeter.
40 millimeter, 20
Yep.
millimeter.
Yep.
And of course, the 5-inch gun was probably shot down more than
Sure.
those smaller guns. They had these proximity shells,
Sure.
and it would go out, and when it got near metal, it would explode.
Yeah.
And probably 3 out of the 5 planes we shot down were shot down by the 5-inch.
How about that?
But thank goodness, because by the time they got close enough for our 40s to be any good, you were probably going to get hit. So
Yeah.
thank goodness
That
for the
was too
5-inch.
close.
Yeah. Well, that's about.
Well, those are wonderful sketches.
I don't know if I have time to read these or not, but I'll go through them if you want me to, and try to get them in here.
You want to do that now?
The things that show this, I won't worry about anymore. I guess just
Okay.
read the poems, okay? The first one would be a cat house line, and of course a cat house is a house of ill repute.
Right.
That's a slang for it. What lines are those? A puzzled sailor asks. The answer, blithely given, hints at ignorance, but patient also tells a tale. These men have pleasure on their minds and bulging loins to show for weeks of training shakedowns in the North. Their dreams of pin-ups or of wives or girlfriends unobtainable have hung over bunk and daily task, persistent, sweet, intangible. This substitute, at best it's temporary and unsafe, a prophylactic clutter. The town's unseemly, dingy face is backed by tropic lavishness. The sun, a constant pressing hand on the shoulder or on naked head. Who cares? It's respite from the boring aisles of bunks and metal lockers. They'll take their pleasure when they can. Uncertainty a hovering thing, their future in the coming days unknown. War's legacy, that some will not return from battle with the body whole, is felt by all. They'll drink their drinks and tell their tales and give shore patrol some business too. And when the ship's away again, they'll be there in the designated place, at battle station or some grimy chore, to help their crew survive what fate deals out. That line, it's nothing but a blip on nature's radar screen. Let's wish them well and help them back aboard.
Very, very sensitive, very sensitive.
Let's do Surigao Straits next, if that's
Okay.
Fuso, which is the battleship. Fuso's shells fall short. We made the run, which is a torpedo run, and victory's sweet as the sound of distant booming echo dies away, dull but definite. We made the run, our duty done, the purpose of our ship fulfilled at last. As probing fish their targets find, a satisfying dash to safety is now the thing. The furious dreadnought, Fuso, stung and bleeding, makes our joy a fleeting thing. We still must zig and zag beyond the sheltering, sooty curtain, still must dodge our enemies' retorts. First comes a blinding spread of skyward lights that hang and taunt us with their constant expose. No hiding here without our screen, so naught to do but turn our throbbing engines high, high as sense allows. Our hopes that wounded Fuso's lost the scent and crippled so to spread the distance ever. The next retort from monster vile is salvos of the fatal kind, fatal for our naval home if hit direct, since one or two might do the trick and end our war with fiery blast. We see the columns thump and crack close by, but scattered mercifully, white knives that seek the blackened sky like cubes on dice board rolling up. What number will come up? A lucky 7 would be our doom, but odds are with the Melvin crew. Our charging flight is good and true, and we will live to fight on other shores. Reward comes unexpectedly. We cruise while gaining breath off Denigat Island, and there our startled eyes enjoy the crossing of the T. A dream come true for the 7th Fleet. We cheer within ourselves and watch a night sky filled with final tracers, bright orange parabolas that write obituaries for the Japanese. We looked across and it was just a solid orange of shells coming up. Well, I don't know whether we have time for anything more.
Very, very effective. Very sensitive, Roger.
Well, I have the one about the man who missed the boat.
Okay.
If we have time. It's called Die, which is his name. Die takes a dip. Oh, liberty's a blessed thing, to venture out from crowded ship or shorepost dull, to chance observance of a new experience, or one familiar, comfortable. Sea duty brings peculiar tasks for those who seek to go ashore. If anchored out, you must traverse by boats unstable at their best, and they are worse on windy days or nights when sea and sky are black and treacherous. The needed nets of rope or gangway of those seem to mock gymnastic skills of those unwary or whose judgment lacks its usual clarity, those alcoholic casualties. Good shipmates, true, will always help in the here to there, but even they are helpless witness when the elements at times do not cooperate. A case in point, one Jesse Dye, intrepid sailor though he be, had numbed his brain at some Noumea town retreat. His transit back to ship by small boat on this savage night seemed but routine, till nature, in the form of wind and waves, made ropes and boat a squeeze box to and fro. Bang and swoosh, bang and swoosh, the chorus went. A crushing blow each time. Impatient Jesse took a chance and lunged on swoosh instead of bang. Down he plunged and promptly disappeared from view of shipmates, breathless now with fear. Full force, the boat hit the ship again, and all were certain he was crushed. No body floated up, so eyes searched the greenish depths. Long seconds passed, and then a splash was heard, and Jesse's white hat popped above an outer wave. Flailing arms were gathered in, and he was pulled aboard the tiny boat. Hoist, push, pull, tug, and moments later, there he was on Melvin's deck, secure. Crewmates know that spidery climb full well from past experience, but still in wonder shake their heads these 50 years beyond and say, I did that many times back then. Let the young folks do it now. So,
my goodness, this is exceptional what you did, what you were aware of, how you recorded it, sketching, poeticizing, and so forth. I think it's just remarkable, Roger.
well, I like I said, I basically enjoyed being in the Navy.
Yeah,
I was lucky, or
Right.
had a good crew.
right.
And so the naval experience to me was pleasant. The end of it, and maybe I got time to say this, I don't know. When we got to San Francisco, our ship was mothballed, as you know, they put the plastics over everything. And so I got to say goodbye to our ship. I was transferred to Treasure Island, and of course didn't see the ship. But I got the word somehow or other that our ship was going to go to San Diego and put in mothballs down there. And so I got the word exactly when that ship would go through the Golden Gate.
Oh,
And so I got a bus and I went out to the Golden Gate by myself.
on the bridge.
I climbed out on rocks that are surrounded, those big pillars that hold the bridge. Climbed out on the rocks so that I could get down there, somewhere near the water. And I waited. Guess what? There comes the Melvin. I said,
Oh boy, I know. A very, very, very sensitive
I said
moment.
goodbye.
Yeah, yeah. She was being towed by a tug?
No, she was underway with her own.
Oh, her own power.
Yeah, they
man.
mothballed her, but you could still operate,
I see.
the bridge and so forth.
Sure.
And so
Oh,
I could see the 680 on there, and it was,
oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, I know.
even though it wasn't, it's just Navy, ship, whatever,
Yeah,
it gets to you after
piece of
after
metal,
3
you know,
years
but-
of being on that ship with all these men,
absolutely.
and they saved your life, basically. It just,
Sure.
excuse me for breaking up,
Well, no, that's.
but that was my final Navy
Last
experience,
for
you might say. I couldn't get home fast enough after that,
Oh, I'm
and,
sure. I'm sure.
It was February 26th of 1946 that I was discharged and then got the train home, But,
How about that? Yes.
just really,
Well, that's an amazing experience, and your sensitivity shows through so strongly, Roger, and your understanding and appreciation of what you were experiencing. That's
I
so
understood,
important.
how important we were. I mean,
Sure.
you can't do things like we did without every ship being important, every person being important.
Absolutely.
And so you don't downgrade anybody.
Well, those ships, although they were made of steel, as you say, they were breathed life into them by the people who served aboard them.
Right.
Right.
And it wasn't all pleasant. I saw guys get drunk on torpedo juice. They'd get into a fight, and two guys would be standing up there tearing each other's clothes off.
Sure.
I didn't understand that. What is this? It was a little 18-year-old guy. I just didn't understand it. So you saw unpleasant things there.
Yes.
Like throwing up in the big can, like I said, those kind of things. And when we went to Bermuda, that was the one time I got sick. I went to Bermuda, and everybody was sick. All the new guys basically were sick. And I was climbing up to my director on this little ladder we had, and I got sick halfway up the ladder. And I got near the top, and I couldn't hold it anymore. And so I leaned over and I threw up on somebody down below. It was an officer, had a white hat. I knew it was an officer, and guess what? It was our captain.
Oh my gosh.
And so that was a bad thing for me.
That was a bad thing.
All he did was shake off his hat.
Sure.
Seaman, he just
Yeah,
went on.
right.
He didn't bother about it that much, which made me feel good because, he understood where I came from. I was sick.
Well, you were
I was a new in the Navy.
Yeah. Well, that's something too, that you had command people who had sensitivity.
That was our first captain. Our second one took us through most of the big battles. And he was the one we loved, and
right.
What
was his name?
I was afraid you'd ask me that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is a block.
You've done so well on everything.
At my age, 83, I have blocks. But
now I want to find out. We've got a couple minutes left, and I want to find out. You got back home to Cincinnati. Came into Union Terminal, did you, on the train?
Right.
Beautiful Union Terminal.
Yeah.
Your family was there to meet you?
They were.
Oh boy, what a reunion.
That was
Oh my God.
nothing like it, of course. I love train experiences are unbelievable.
I know. They were.
Guys we'd train to stop, and guys would get off and ride cows. I mean, they'd get off the train and they'd be out in a field somewhere. There was cows. The guys would get out and ride them. This is off of a train. The train is stopped. That's what you do. So again, naivety. I just couldn't believe guys were doing this. But trains were. I think they're a very interesting thing.
Oh, they are. They're wonderful.
I'd like to ride one again sometime. I
know,
haven't
they're
probably ridden one.
Wonderful way of travel.
Since then.
So you got home, and then signed up with the GI Bill, or what did you do?
Signed up to the GI Bill, and
Where'd you go to school then?
I went to Marietta first for a year, and decided I didn't like Marietta. It just wasn't my type school, and so I dropped out just before I was supposed to end up my first year, and tried out with the St. Louis Browns baseball team. And I went down to spring training with them, and through batting practice and so forth, and tried out with them, and might have gone on to a career in the baseball major leagues. The Browns were, of course, eliminated later on.
They went out of business. Sure.
I got a sore arm, and so I didn't make it.
You were a southpaw, huh?
I was a southpaw.
Oh boy!
But then I went to Ohio State and became one of the nuts of football nuts, and I loved it. Of course, I'd played football, and so I loved the atmosphere. People look at it and they think you're crazy, the way people are at Ohio State, but I loved it.
Oh, I understand that perfectly.
And then I still had GI Bill left, and I went a summer thinking I might possibly teach because artists don't have a ready-made job like a lot of people do. So I went for a couple semesters there, but I graduated, of course, and then did that. But I had some GI Bill left, so I went to the Cincinnati Art Academy for 3 years.
For you.
Got scholarships each year to stay. I could stay on one more year. They paid for my scholarship because I was such a good sculptor.
Right.
And so I had 3 years at the Cincinnati Art Academy.
Well, now you must have had some exhibitions, did you, with your work? and so forth?
I don't. My exhibition is in my house. I have sculptures of my dad and my family, and
You belong to the art club?
I have pictures. I did at one time. Yeah, my dad was one of the presidents there at one time.
Oh my goodness,
And I have pictures of things I did in the academy.
that's very.
I have a statue of Abraham with a lamb over his shoulder at Peterloo, which is out near Madeira.
Oh, yes, sure.
A huge estate out there. Peterloo has what they call Abraham's Walk. They named it after my statue.
Well, for heaven's sake,
I named the statue Abraham because.
I've seen that.
And there's a walk, a brick walkway that goes out, and my little statue is out
The
there.
Emery
It's
family
about this
out there. Yeah.
Emery
Yeah.
family.
That's
When she
amazing.
bought that statue, she said, "I want to see you, Roger." And so she invited me out there, and I sat in their library
How nice.
and watched Mr. Emery out on the patio reading out there.
How about that?
She took me out to meet him just for a second or
Big
two.
Jack.
But she interviewed me in their library, which is floor-to-ceiling books on all four.
Yeah.
Just beautiful, beautiful place.
Wow.
And so that was an experience. But that's one thing I can, my kids and my grandkids, I can tell them about. And
Absolutely.
my exhibition is there in Peterloo.
And a
My
very famous
statue
place.
is
Absolutely. Well, Roger Johnson, we've just had a great experience with you here, and hearing your story and your spirit and your passion for life and your country and your family and the Navy and your great ship, the Melvin. And we want to thank you for your giving us your time. Now you're on DVD. Your family's going to see this. It'll be on the web here at the
my goodness.
library.
That's
and
great.
the copy goes to the archives in Washington, and the
really?
copy stays here. So again,
well, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you so much. God bless, and I hope we'll see you again.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.